Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mage Kings Vanguard channel, and today bringing to you a very deep deck profile. A couple weeks ago I was at BCS Singapore, and as you can see I actually finished top 8. With this, I would like to say very interesting Narukami deck of mine. It's not the very conventional build that you usually see topping, like the one with Vowing Saber reverse and stuff. So this is how I personally would make Narukami for the current meta, I guess. Before that, let me just go over my match report of the day. First round was against, but it was a buy first round I got from a shop challenge. So yep, there was a free win. Second round I was up against Team Maidens, which I lost. Subsequently, I don't remember the order. I knew I fought one Grand Blue. I fought a Link Joker Gize. I fought DP. I fought Spike Brothers. And what was the last deck that I fought? I don't really remember the last deck that I fought actually. So then in top 8 I lost to Highlander. That's roughly how my tournament went. So yep, let me just go over and explain how this whole deck actually works. Basically, this deck I would say is actually basically going into this deck, you actually have two ways of playing the deck. You can play as a control deck, like basically you just control and store into a very big win con, which is like your GB8 or Voltage, which I will explain later. Or you can play like a rush deck / aggro deck, like where you can turbo, which I'm playing the Strike Dagger Dragon. You can turbo into a exterminate and just like go ham from there. Like you can just steal games like out of nowhere. So so I'll just go over deck profile. Like I just briefly mentioned earlier, I'm playing the Strike Dagger Dragon. What he does is basically, if you have a Zuita Vanguard, which is the grade 2 Eradicator, and you have a Heisen Rearguard, you can put both him and Heisen into Soul. You can search your deck for a Dragonic Descendant and you can Superior Right. So like, for those who are new to Premium, basically Superior Right decks have the advantage whereby if you go first and you hit the Superior Right, you are able to just get be able to strike first. Like while your opponent's on grade 2, you can just strike from there. So I actually like that cheese factor and that unfair advantage that you have. Like you have to have a very good reason to not playing a B starter, because you are losing out on the card draw and you're losing out on the quick shield if you're going second. So in my opinion, you actually should be playing a superior engine in this current meta, because like look at the big decks right now. You have things like Highlander, which if they ride into Reindeer and they Soul Blast out the Reindeer, they're gonna ride back down. Or you're playing a Steam Maiden, they have the grade 3, and often they just ride a grade 2 from Soul. Not Soul, from drop. So these are decks whereby you don't really want to let them go first and just have that ride down play. Because if you do, you are in a sense losing a grade 2 game. Oh, not to mention Nightmare Doors as well. Like these three are the main ride down decks you need to be worried about. So if you're able to hit the superior off, even if you are going second, you are putting them in the position whereby, okay, do they just go they have to go for a strike turn, or would they actually wait a turn and just like try to form whatever markers they can get, like Nightmare Doors, farming Excel, or if let's say Highlander, they want to be greedy and going for the extra force marker, which they shouldn't be doing because they should be Hetralda, going into Hetralda. So okay, yes, I agree. Like even though you are going second and you're superior right and giving away a first strike is it can be risky, but the thing is, you are losing out a lot if you are going second and your opponent goes first and they do the whole ride down play. Regardless, you are going to lose a lot of momentum. You're going to be at a very high damage count. Then by the time you ride up, you are probably going to be eating like, I don't know, a very painful Hetralda turn, or you're going to eat a very strong Yvette turn, which will most likely end the game right there, which is something you don't want. Because if you superior right from there, then it's just strike, you will be in a lower damage count, and if you superior right to him, you get an XL marker, which potentially could dig into more defensive pieces, which I will explain later on, like in the deck. So yeah, starter of choice, we are going with Strike Dagger Dragon. And you can't play the boss monster without Strike Dagger Dragon himself. Himself is the Eradicator Dragonic Descendant. Okay, so besides carrying the name Dragonic Descendant, this actually brings a lot to the table to how this whole deck functions. Before I explain this card, I need to show you the next grade 3 that I'm playing, which is the 4 copies of Sweet Command Dragon. So okay, I'll just go over Sweet Command skill. On place Vanguard Rearguard Circle, you may Soul Blast 1 and bind an opponent front row, and you may choose a back row from your opponent Rearguard and just move it to a front row circle. And second skill is when your opponent is being bound, you may counterblast one, soul blast one, you can bind another one. Okay, you can bind another one without cost. Then you can counterblast one, soul blast one, and if you have 4 or more damage, you can grab another imaginary gift Excel, and you can call an Eradicator from drop to rearguard circle. So there are many valuable targets that you want to be calling from this deck, from drop with this deck. So yeah. Okay, so basically what this does, in a sense, is if you are going for like a very strong exterminate play and opponent still has rearguards in the front row, you can basically just go into Sweep Command, do his own plays, get rid of one card, and if you are on high damage count, which quite unlikely you are on, you can clear another one and just get an XL and just go hand from there. You get full value out of exterminate, you get a full 2 or 3 draws, you get 20-30k to front row. So yeah, that's like, I think this is like the best grade 3 right target in the deck right now. If Naru were to get hit, I would kind of say I will hit this guy and not Vowing Saber Reverse, because this is like the playmaker to everything. So okay, so basically after explaining the card, I go on to Dragonic Descendant. Okay, initially I actually played this as 2 off. Like I mean, if you are greedy, you can start on 1. Like, that was my initial plan. But what I realized is, if you are playing Sweep Command, like, riding Dragonic Descendant on top of Sweep Command is actually a really, really strong play. Like, you... Okay, I'll just explain now. I do play the First Thunder, which I will explain later. Basically, what First Thunder does is, yeah, in a sense, no matter what Vanguard you're on and you get the whole play off, you will be, like, on a Sweep Command Vanguard at the start of a turn. So, if let's say you've been pushed into high damage count, then you start your turn, stand and draw. Even if you draw in the Descendant, it's not bad, right? Like, you can just ride. So what it does is, on the first skill, is like, you get to trigger any abilities that the card that you wrote on has. So basically, on ride, you can trigger both abilities that I mentioned earlier, the bind and the getting an XL circle. And after that, you can still strike, because everything this... Okay, the whole skill happens when you are still on your right face, sorry. So you can basically help to build up the very strong, like, feel before you go into exterminate, in a sense. So I think these are like the best grade 3s in the deck. Like, I wouldn't play anything else. Like, if you're playing Vowing Saber Reverse in this deck, that's one thing I want to bring up, is that Vowing Saber Reverse, you need to have that Vowing in your soul or rearguard to get the whole restand skill out, which the thing is, you almost will never get, because if you are doing First Thunder plays, means you are never gonna have that Vowing Saber rearguard unless you rewrote or you got an extra copy and call it out. And even then, it's not a very strong strategy in my opinion, because you're still gonna eat out a counterblast one if you're gonna do the bind tree, 1 from drop, 1 from hand, 1 from field, and the restand skill takes a counterblast and soul blast 1, and you, if I'm not wrong, and you have to lock another one as well. So generally, I feel that deck actually needs a lot more setup and a lot more piece reliant. And yeah, I generally opted not to play for that. And in some cases whereby you are against like a resist deck like Riviere, like if you bump into it by accident, or some Highlander player tends to tag the Riviere with the Great One just to fuck with Narukami, you just auto lose in a sense. But if you are playing the Superior Ride engine, you still have a small chance that you can Superior Ride, go and exterminate, put a high damage count, and just cheese games from there. So like, you are not completely helpless in those matchups. So yep, I spent like a good 5 minutes explaining the grade 3s, and now I'm finally moving on to grade 2. So I am playing the 4 copies of Zuitan. Mainly, you are playing him for the name, just to do the Superior Ride, but the draw skill is actually really good. So what he does is, at the end of battle, you attack a Vanguard, and if your opponent has no front or rearguard circle, you can just move it into soul and draw 1. So late game, if you call this off, Sweep Command, you can just get a draw and hope you dig into more Q triggers or PGs to help survive your opponent's onslaught, which is, I feel, is very instrumental in a sense. So yeah, generally the main purpose you're playing here is for the name. If you're playing any other Narukami build that doesn't involve the Superior Ride engine, I wouldn't recommend playing this at all. Like, I don't think it's a very good card by nature. So yeah, 4 copies of him. Next, I am playing the 4 copies of Unruly Dragon. Okay, for those who don't know what it does is, when he intercepts, you may counterblast 1. You can choose an opponent's rearguard that isn't attacking or boosting. You may retire it. So what this does is basically it sets up for your first Thunder play, the home beast target, or it just fucks with your opponent's board. If let's say let's say you call this down early and your opponent you're playing against Highlander and they are able to get a Persister off, like by some miracle, they call grade 1, grade 2 Persister. They swing into your Vanguard, all you gotta do is just intercept, counterblast 1, just burn the other Persister that isn't attacking, and they basically get a whole turn shut down. Yeah, so then you just slowly just start binding them off so they don't get the play off in a sense. So 4 copies of these, like, given how little Narukami actually draws, I don't know about the conventional build, from my opinion, in my opinion, they don't really draw much other than exterminate turns. This is what basically gets you to the late game. Like, you're just trying to prolong yourself into a late game, which I think most opponents won't want to get into against Narukami. That's why we are maxing this at 4. Even if you see him early on, like, it's fine. If you don't need him that early, you can just dish him off with no school if you check top 5 as something that you need. Then later on, you can just use sweep command and fetch him back if you are really desperate for the whole denial Griffin play, I guess. Yep. So 4 copies of Unruly Dragon. Rounding off our grade 2s, we are running 3 copies of Cho-Oh. The main reason why he's here, he is actually like a gap closer. Like, in some situation whereby maybe you just don't see your sweep command, you don't see anything that just binds. As you realize, everything in the deck doesn't really bind besides the grade 3 and stun burst, I guess. So in those cases whereby you really need a power game and you need a restander to help close out games, this is where it comes in. I'm not playing more of him because of a certain grade 0 that I'm playing, First Thunder, which I mentioned many times in this video already. You don't really have much room to play for, and I personally wouldn't. And to be very honest, after DBT 7 comes out and we get Meteor Flare Dragon, I am actually going to replace him with Meteor Flare Dragon because I think Meteor Flare Dragon is actually the way to go. If opponent chooses to play stuff like a resist deck, which I think going into this BCS, I'm expecting people to be attacking against Narukami, like getting a lot of resist and stuff. So you really want to have the ability to remove them, and maybe Honoli if it ever comes to that. But you generally you don't see people calling down Honoli on the main phase to, you know, counter Narukami in a sense, because they know the Stumbers will just get rid of it. So I'm playing 3 copies of Cho-Oh, and that's all. 11 grade 2s, rounding off the grade 2s. Next, I am playing the 4 copies of Isolation Eradicator Nusku. This is the card that makes the whole Superior Right engine actually viable. Basically, what he does is, on play, you just check top 5, add any Eradicator to hand, and you may ditch a card. Sorry. So what this does is, if let's say you have a Hisen, but you're missing a Zuitan, just write this and you check into it. Maybe it helps you to get that turbo that you need, or vice versa. Or if let's say you need an Unruly to actually survive your opponent's turn, or First Thunder to get a whole play set up, you can do that as well. Or in general, if you're missing a grade 2 to even write, you can do that as well. I can sing many praises about this card, but yeah, like checking top 5 or anything, like practically anything in the deck is up for grabs. So yeah, playing 4 of these. Next, I mentioned him earlier, is part of the Superior Right engine package, is the Sword Dance Eradicator Hisen. So he's mainly there just to help with the Superior Right, or if let's say you have multiple copies early on and you're doing a no school and you still have him in hand, you can just ditch it for it, I guess, because generally in the late game, he is the card with the least value in the deck beyond turn 2. So 4 copies of him, you absolutely need to have this maxed out, and you need to have Zuita maxed out because they are like essentially your grade 2 engine in a sense. So playing 4 copies of Hisen. And to round off grade 1s, I am playing the 3 copies of Demolition. What I'm not playing for is same reason as Cho-Oh, like due to space constraint for First Thunder, I had to like cut this down to 3, sorry. But in conventional lists, you will see 4 because this thing helps with your grade 2 game a lot. But do take note that this deck doesn't grade 2 game. As you can see, the whole deck can't grade 2 game because you are just focusing on superior riding and hope you dig to pieces and just yeah. Because if you are grade 2 gaming in this meta, I don't think you are winning against the big decks like those ride down decks. You are gonna lose out on a lot of advantage if you try to get to game them. And yeah, so I'm playing 3 copies of Dragonic Dragon. He's still a very good card if you see him early, but you are fine getting by without him actually. So he's a very good bonus if you see him. Yeah, so playing 3 copies of him. Next, I am playing the 4 copies of First Thunder Draco Kit. As we mentioned multiple times earlier in this video. Okay, so I haven't explained his skill actually. So what this card does is when opponent's card is put into a drop zone, so you have multiple ways of doing that. One is the card that we went through earlier, Unruly Dragon, or a G-Guard Impede. So a card put into drop zone. You may put it into Soul. You may check the top 10 cards of your deck, and you may write a sweep command extend. So basically what this does is, if let's say opponent's attacking into you, like opponent's Vanguard's attacking into you, and they have like 2 red guards in the front row, you can just Unruly to intercept and kill one, and do his skill, move to Soul, check top 10, and if you do write the sweep command, you can Soul Blast one and get rid of the other front row, so they have no more attackers. But the added bonus is that your opponent's Vanguard, like that was just attacking you, misses target, so you don't take any damage. So just treat it like a PG that you get an XL out of it. So I am playing 4 copies, but generally if opponents playing around it, like let's say you're playing against a Highlander that if they got lucky and saw a Tiura, they'll bounce this and you don't get the whole play off, which can be very unfortunate. But generally in any matchups that they cannot answer to your field, like you have Unruly set up, you have First Thunder set up, you generally you win that game. Like there's nothing that's stopping you. Like your opponent can't do anything on their turn unless they are going like full resist force, which is I think is quite unlikely. And you get set up for your next turn. So if let's say you end your turn on like 2 XL circles, or maybe 1, then you do this play, you get another one, and if you have multiple of him, you can just go off. But if you're that lucky, you can just keep farming XL. Then if next turn you are able to get like what do you call that? Descendant, which I think is very unlikely. If you do get him, that's like even more XL circle to work with. So playing 4 copies of him, like he's part of the reason why you are able to play this very defensive gameplay if you really need to. So yep, as I mentioned earlier, this deck, you can choose to swap between like how you want to play the deck. Like you can play like an aggro deck, you can play it as a control deck. I think this is the reason why the control aspect actually works. Because like, if you're playing Unruly by himself, just counterblasting one and popping a front row, I don't think that's like very impactful in my opinion, because there are decks that can outscale that. Like if you're playing against Grand Blue, you're gonna pop one Skull Dragon, but they're gonna have multiple swing at you. This is the one that gives you the edge over that. So like, if let's say they do the whole, like, okay, if you're fighting against Grand Blue and they don't tag the MPix, the D card that gives, if you have 3 or less, if I'm not wrong, rear guard, you give the same column resist, which did come out against when I was fighting against Grand Blue. So yeah, unless you're fighting against that, you are able to just get rid of their whole like ghost shit turn if they're trying to go for the kill, because like doing that whole play just get rid of their whole front row. Like you get rid of any Night Storm, you get rid of any what do you call that? Skull Dragons. Yeah. So playing 4 of these. So there's just a few scenarios whereby this is actually very useful. But yeah, there are many more scenarios that you can think of. Like if you're put in a spot, the play is there for you. And as for trigger wise, I am playing the 4 draw triggers. Like I don't think there's anything much to explain the triggers. Playing 4 draw triggers, 4 crits that count for striding, that counts at grade 3 when you stride, 3 insult crits, 1 over trigger. And I think the spiciest trigger of the deck, I think, is the 4 of Worm Toxic Eradicator Seyobo. So the reason, okay, I think you might be wondering, like, why are you not playing Hue Guardians? Like, I think Hue Guardians are the best thing that happened to Vanguard in a sense. So why we are not playing Hue Guardians is because, like, as you realize, I mentioned, okay, the way I've mentioned is that you realize you are never grade 2 gaming, and if any opportunity you get to superior right, you will go for the superior right. So that's when you realize the grade 3 Hue Guardians doesn't bring much to the deck. So, and I don't play any those type of generic grade 3 searches, so I have no way of tutoring the Hue Guard out. But with Seyobo, I can, because she has a Eradicator name. So that means if let's say Nusku sees it in the top 5, I can grab it if I'm really desperate to getting a Hue Guard. And one more thing is that not being a Eradicator in name means if I did damage the grade 3 Hue Guardians, I won't be able to counterblast it with Unruly, because as we mentioned earlier, Unruly asks for a Eradicator to be counterblasted, so that's one reason. Another reason why I'm not playing it. So generally, besides the triggers that's not Hue, everything in your deck can be counterblasted for Unruly. So this is why I'm playing the 20k heal instead of Heal Guardians, because there's almost no scenario that I'll be needing it. I guess you can call down and just shoot yourself a damage. That's something you'll miss out on. But generally, if your opponent don't really damage deny you, you should be good to go. Yeah. So 4 copies of Heal Guard, the Eradicator heal. And now I am moving on to the G Zone, which I think I actually need to explain how each game plan works. Like I mentioned that this deck can play aggro, this deck can play defensive, like as a control deck. So this is the part side of the deck that you are playing as a control deck. Basically, you are playing 3 stun burst, 2 voltage, and 1 GBA. So in very specific matchups whereby if let's say if let's say you're going second and superior right, and somehow you do stabilize, you can't really go for a very like aggressive playback, because if you do try to aggro back, they're just gonna punch you back even harder. So this is where you have to play a very slow grind game. Like, so basically you just keep stun burst, and when you feel it's time to go for the kill, you can just go into voltage and just end. Because from what stun burst can do is, even though you stun burst, you go into if assuming you have a sweet command heart, you can still do the sweet command skill if you are managed to bind your opponent's rearguard, and you can just keep farming circles to make these even stronger, this plays even stronger. So in a sense, it is like a control deck. You just try to scale and play into a late game, and you have pieces like Unruly and First Thunder to help you get there, because you have even more defensive pieces, not just your not just your G Guardians. So that's why this play is very viable. So if let's say Naruto actually get hit, Stunburst gets hit, you can just turn this whole deck into like a full aggro deck. Like, I think you can get by without Stunburst in my opinion. So, and GBA is just this big ass mini finisher, and if things goes wrong, if they don't die from this GBA, you can go into voltage and still try to kill from there. Yep, and this deck actually does have longevity. You can actually go into a GBA. It is very possible. So this is the first 6 cards of the deck. Of the G zone, sorry. And next is the 3 copies of Exterminate. This is what makes your aggro play. Okay, this is the reason why it is possible to actually play the whole Superior Right engine. Before this, like before the existence of Exterminate, you can play the Superior Right engine. Like, New School existed back then, but if you're Superior Riding, why is Superior Riding 4 into a Stunburst? Like, if you're Superior Riding in those Stunbursts first, you are not gonna get a 4 bind off. Like, there's gonna be nothing in your opponent's drop zone, there's not gonna be nothing in your opponent's rearguard to actually like get maximum value out of Stunburst. But with the existence of Exterminate, things change. So basically what he does is that when placed, you can Soul Blast 1, you can draw 1 card for every open front or rearguard circle that your opponent has. So this helps to build hand, dig into your pieces, dig into your huge Heal Guardians to not Heal Guardians, your Heal triggers to help survive turns. And second skill is Counter Blast 1 X skill. Your whole front row gets plus 10k for each open rearguard circle that your opponent has. So if let's say you are playing against Nightmare Dolls and they have farmed multiple Excel circles, this is the card that punishes them. You are gonna just get like 30k, 40k to a whole front row and they'll probably die. So this is the aggro aspect of the deck. So playing 3 copies of that. And to round out the G zone, I'm just gonna tell you now, I'm playing abundance of G guards. Like, being realistic, these are the only G units that actually matters in the deck, because VMAX is a very niche card which almost never comes up. I decided to drop that. And yeah, the rest of Naruto Kami Strike has been like hot garbage as of recent years. So next, okay, basically first is 3 copies of Impede Dragon. A third copy actually initially I was running on 2. For the longest time I was playing on 2. But I realized there are those instances whereby if let's say you go into Exterminate and let's say you aggro and you fail to go for a kill and your opponent do set up the whole resist play like against Highlander, you have the option to just triple G guard and just go into GBA and hope you get rid of it and you can just kill from there. So there is a very niche situation whereby you'll come up. But generally if it doesn't come up, it's fine, you can just leave it there. So what Impede does is that on place, you need to be GB1. You can flip a G Guardian face up. You may choose one of your opponent's rearguard, retire it, then bind it. Then if your opponent has 2 or more rearguards, then they retire another one. So this is the playmaker for your First Thunder. So even if you just get the retire then bind off, so basically just remove 1 card, you can still do the Unruly the first thunder into Sick Command play, because retiring means it actually did enter the drop zone, and thus first thunder can actually go off. So playing 3 copies of these. Next, playing 2 bulwarks to just basically have a decently big shield, and you can just basically play a bit more defensive. Like if they are playing against stuff like a Dagda, like stuff like a Luat, which I'm known for. No, I'm just kidding. You can just get rid of the Dagda so they don't get like the whole cheese. You can stand the Dagda and just do the skill one more time. That's just an example, but there are many instances whereby this actually comes up. Next is one of the new guy. Basically, for opponent may bind 2 rear guards. If they don't, you get free 20k shield. And to round up the last G Guardian, I am playing the 1 copy of Dismal. This card actually came out in testing after realizing that, okay, if let's say you are put in a situation whereby you went first, okay, you went second, sorry, and you superior road, and you are able, you have Unruly, you have First Thunder, and let's say you have a Hyuga. So, one thing is, he's not online because in order to play him, you need 1 card face down in G-Zone before you put him down. So this card never comes up. So if let's say you are put in that situation whereby you only have a Hyuga, 1 Hyuga, your opponent's gonna start bullying your Unruly. Like they're just keep attacking into Unruly. And after a while, even if you can't guard it, okay, even if you're able to guard it, you aren't able to intercept with him because he's the one that's being attacked. So what you can do is just basically start bullying Unruly, just drop a Hyuga, just protect this, and you can still get your whole miss target / denial Griffin play off if you desperately need it. So yeah, this card is actually very important in the deck. Initially I wasn't running him, but after putting myself in those type of scenarios, I realized that this actually comes up. Okay, so that just rounds off my deck profile for BCS Singapore. So yeah, I hope you can actually learn something from this deck profile, because this deck actually went through a lot of changes. Like even if Mischief Flare and Ripples weren't banned, like they didn't get hit, I will actually still be playing this deck because I think you can actually compete with those decks even though they didn't get banned. Like yeah. So that's all for today, guys. Bye.